Imagine standing at your own son's burial, heartbroken, surrounded by family, when suddenly sirens, flashing lights. A police officer steps out, looking straight at you. Confused, you turn to see your youngest son, just a kid, being questioned like he's a criminal. And the reason? A complaint from none other than the neighborhood HOA president. A woman who's been nothing but trouble since the day you moved in. This wasn't just any Karen moment. This was cruelty at its peak. My son wasn't trespassing, he wasn't causing a disturbance. He was simply stepping away for a moment, grieving in his own way. But that wasn't enough for her. She saw an opportunity to exercise her so-called authority, and she took it. What she didn't know, though, was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because I'm not just any grieving father, I'm the Attorney General. And if there's one thing I know better than anyone, it's the law. As I stood there, watching this unfold, I felt the anger rise. Not just for my son, but for every family that's been bullied by an HOA with too much power and no compassion. What happened next? Let's just say, this Karen was about to learn a lesson she'd never forget. The officer looked at me, then back at my son, clearly unsure of the situation. My boy, barely holding it together, wiped his face with his sleeve, standing frozen as if he had done something wrong. I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. What's going on here? The officer shifted on his feet, glancing at the woman standing smugly at the edge of the cemetery. We got a call about a disturbance, he said. A complaint from a resident. I didn't even need to turn my head to know who it was. There she stood, arms crossed, lips pursed, her eyes filled with that entitled satisfaction. A disturbance? At my own son's burial? My youngest had only stepped near the HOA-maintained sidewalk to take a breath, trying to hold himself together. And that was enough for her to call the cops. I took a slow breath, forcing down the anger rising in my chest. "Officer," I said evenly, "my son is grieving his brother. We are literally at a funeral." The officer hesitated, his expression shifting. Even he knew this was ridiculous, but Karen wasn't done. "Rules are rules," she snapped, stepping closer. "This is private property. He can't just wander off like that." I turned to her, my patience wearing thin. She had no idea who she was messing with. I stared at her, still trying to process the sheer audacity. My son was mourning, our family was in pain, and this woman, this self-appointed enforcer of the HOA, had called the police over nothing. I could see the way she stood, her chin lifted just enough to make it clear she thought she had won. The officer shifted uncomfortably. Even he knew this was unnecessary, but there was protocol, and I could tell he wasn't sure how to back out of the situation without upsetting the HOA president. "Sir, I just need to confirm there's no issue here," he said carefully, probably hoping to diffuse whatever mess Cheetah created. I took a deep breath and nodded, keeping my anger in check. "There is no issue. We're attending my son's funeral, and my youngest stepped aside for a moment. That's it." Karen scoffed. "That's not the point. This is a community with rules. He was in an unauthorized area." My hands clenched at my sides. "Unauthorized?" I repeated. "You're saying my son, who just lost his brother, needed *permission* to grieve." She gave a tight smile. "Rules keep order." The officer sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Ma'am, it doesn't seem like." But she wasn't finished. "Maybe if you people followed the HOA guidelines, this wouldn't be happening." I felt the shift in the air. The officer stiffened. My son swallowed hard, stepping closer to me. I could feel every eye in the cemetery now watching. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know what I was capable of, but she was about to find out. The silence that followed was thick. The officer's face tightened, his posture shifting like he knew this was about to spiral. My son gripped my sleeve, his fingers trembling. He wasn't scared of the police. He was scared of what this moment was turning into. A simple moment of grief, hijacked by a woman who thrived on control. I took a step forward, locking eyes with her. You called the cops over a grieving child. My voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the edge beneath it. Do you have any idea how heartless that is? She smirked, shrugging like she wasn't the one disrupting a funeral. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. That's when I saw it, the way she looked at me, the way she stood with that self-important confidence. She thought she held the power. She'd have probably done this before, using the HOA as a weapon, controlling the neighborhood through intimidation. But today, she had picked the wrong family. The officer exhaled sharply, turning to her. "Ma'am, there's no crime here. I suggest we let this family grieve in peace." Karen's expression faltered, her smugness flickering for just a second. He still violated the guidelines. I folded my arms, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "Do you even know who I am?" For the first time, hesitation crossed her face. She didn't, but she was about to find out. Karen's eyes narrowed, but I could see it, the flicker of doubt creeping in. She was trying to keep up her act, but something about my confidence made her hesitate. The officer glanced between us, clearly ready to end this pointless scene, but then, just as I thought she might back down, she did something I didn't expect. She pulled out her phone. "Oh, I know exactly who you are now," she said, her lips curling into a smug grin. "Attorney General, huh? Think that puts you above the rules." I stiffened, not because I was worried, far from it, but because I knew what came next. I had dealt with people like her before, people who thought knowing your name gave them power. She was about to make this personal. "You see, I did a little digging," she continued, tapping her screen dramatically. "And it turns out there are quite a few stories about you, aren't there? Public office, legal battles, power." She raised an eyebrow. "But even powerful people can't ignore HOA regulations." My jaw clenched. She was scrambling, reaching for anything to twist in her favor. I could feel the tension in the air, the way my son's breathing had quickened beside me. The officer took a small step back, like he was bracing himself for what came next. Then she turned her phone toward me. "Looks like you've had your own run-ins with controversy." I barely glanced at the screen. I already knew what she'd have found. Old cases, political drama, things she thought would make me retreat. What she didn't understand was that I never backed down, especially not to bullies. I let out a slow breath, keeping my gaze locked on hers. "Is that supposed to intimidate me?" She smirked. "Just letting you know, Attorney General or not, you're in my neighborhood, and I don't let rule breakers get away with things." My patience was razor thin now. "And I don't let people abuse their power," I shot back. "Especially not when they target grieving families." Her smile wavered, but she stood her ground. "You think you can fight this? You might be some big-shot lawyer, but around here, I have connections." I chuckled, low, steady, just enough to make her shift uncomfortably. "You have connections?" I asked. "That's cute. Asterisky have the law asterisk." The officer cleared his throat. "Look, I think we're done here." But before he could finish, Karen's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her smirk fading instantly. Her fingers tightened around the device, and for the first time, real concern crossed her face. Something had just changed, and from the look on her face, it wasn't in her favor. Karen's face drained of color as she read whatever had just popped up on her screen. Her fingers twitched around the phone, her confidence suddenly cracking. I watched as her eyes darted toward me, then back to the officer, like she was trying to calculate her next move. But for the first time, she had nothing to say. "Hat is it, Karen?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Something wrong?" She didn't answer right away, but I saw it, the unmistakable shift from arrogance to panic. Then, with a forced laugh, she tried to brush it off. "It's nothing," she muttered, stuffing the phone back into her pocket. "Just a misunderstanding." The officer frowned. "Misunderstanding?" Karen straightened, clearing her throat, suddenly eager to leave. "I think we've wasted enough time here," she said quickly. "I was just looking out for the community. But, mistakes happen." I didn't move. I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch. "That's quite the change of heart," I said. She forced another laugh, but it was brittle now. "Well, no harm done." But harm had been done. She had disrupted my family in the middle of our grief, turned a funeral into a spectacle, and all for what? Because she thought she had unchecked power. The officer glanced at me, then at Karen, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slight nod, he turned back to my son. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said sincerely. My son nodded, still shaken, but I could tell he appreciated it. Karen turned to leave, but just as she did, her phone buzzed again. This time, she barely glanced at it before shoving it back into her pocket, her shoulders tense. And then I knew. "You didn't just dig into me, did you?" I said calmly. "Someone dug into **. She froze mid-step. I tilted my head slightly. "Who was it, Karen? Someone from the HOA? A higher-up? Or maybe law enforcement?" She said nothing, but her hands curled into fists. That was all the confirmation I needed. The officer took a step forward. "Ma'am, is there something you need to tell us?" Karen spun around, shaking her head. "I don't have to answer to **, she snapped, but her voice wavered just enough to give her away. I let out a slow breath, watching her unravel. "Funny thing about power," I said. "You only have it until someone stronger comes along." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked away, faster than before. I could tell she was desperate to get out of there. Whatever had just happened, whatever message she had received, it had changed everything for her. The officer watched her go before glancing at me. "I don't know what that was about, but something tells me this isn't over." I looked down at my son, then back at the woman disappearing into the distance. "No," I said quietly, "it's not." As Karen disappeared down the sidewalk, the weight of everything settled in. The funeral, the chaos, the sheer audacity of what had just happened. It all felt surreal. My son let out a shaky breath beside me, his fingers still gripping my sleeve. I placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. The officer sighed and gave me a knowing look. "If you decide to take this further, you know where to find me," he said, his tone calm but serious. I nodded. "I appreciate it." He tipped his hat slightly and walked back to his patrol car, leaving us to finally mourn in peace. I turned to my son. His eyes, still red from earlier, searched mine. "She's not going to bother us again, right?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, she won't." Because whatever message she got, whatever had made her face go pale, it was bigger than just us. People like Karen thrived on control, but they were never as untouchable as they thought. She had spent years using her power to intimidate others, but today, she had learned that she wasn't the one holding all the cards. I took a deep breath and looked back at the gravestone. "Let's say goodbye properly," I said softly. And for the first time that day, we finally could.